Welcome to What's My Thesis. I'm Javier Proenza, and today my guest is Nadia Tahoun. And I still said it like it was a Spanish name because that's where I grew up. But welcome on the show. You're in the Hudson Valley, you said?
Yeah, I'm in the Hudson Valley, which is an hour 30 outside of New York City.
Oh,
Hour 15, depending on how fast you drive.
cool. So, okay. Obvious first question is what is the Flower Shop Collective?
Yeah, the Flower Shop Collective is my collective that I co founded. We are a collective of artists, and what we do is we provide services, whether it's fabrication services, career services, grant writing services. Sometimes we act as a gallery, but just like community oriented services for immigrant artists and artists of color.
Oh, okay. Are you an immigrant or were your parents immigrants?
My parents are immigrants.
Your parents are immigrants. When did they come over?
My mom came over when she was 13, and then
Okay.
my dad came over when he was like 20, something like that.
And that was because my parents also my parents came from the Cuban exile to
Hmm.
my I met you through Luna
Yes,
Palazzolo. So are you from Miami
I
originally?
am from
What's
Miami. I'm from Miami. I represent Miami hard. I'm actually going to
okay?
Miami tomorrow.
What are you doing down there?
I have to like, well, it's one of my brother's birthdays,
Okay.
so that's a good excuse. But number two, I am I'm reading next week in New York City for a fundraiser for Gaza, and I just need the time to write like what I'm gonna say and all this stuff.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Miami
And
is like a creative hub. Like I go to Miami honestly when I need to create and pull things out of my brain.
that's a good place for that.
Hmm.
Did you like one of the things for me? I mean, now we're just like completely off track, but one of my favorite things that I keep telling people that don't understand is how nice like water related activities are down there.
Yeah.
Like I think, and it's so funny because I feel lame saying like water sports, and someone teased me and said jet skis, and I was like, no, yeah, those two.
Those two, yeah, those two. Like, yeah, I need to see the ocean. I need to see a mangrove. I just need to go like
Yeah.
home. It's been a minute, so yeah.
Well, okay. So then back to so then your parents met in Miami and New York.
No,
Uh,
it's super random. My parents met in Slidell, Louisiana, which is a really
I
small
my
town.
uncle lives there.
In Slidell? Oh my
Yeah.
God. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's the southeast corner, like of all the
Yeah.
all the places there are to go. Yeah, Slidell is awesome. It's
Yeah.
it's it's right close to New Orleans.
It's right close to New Orleans. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, and it's on the water, so it's pretty nice. All right, cool. Like enough tourism. All right, so then like people that come over are there a lot of artists like where just pretty much anywhere like it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, our physical location is in Brooklyn, New York, and like New York City is the home for so many immigrant communities. So we
Yeah.
have uh, we have people from Bogota, we have people from Cairo, Egypt, we have a Crimean Tartar artist, we have people from Mumbai, we have Puerto Ricans. So yeah, like
Wow.
like we have a very global community.
Anywhere America sticks its nose.
Yeah, basically. Which is like
uh
a big thing we talk about is like decolonizing the art world, etc.
Yeah. Well, can I ask you, like, yeah, I grew up in Miami. I graduated in Palmetto in '98. Just to give you an idea of my generation, but is there a big Palestinian community down there?
No,
Because it's like it's pretty Zionist down there, no?
oh yeah, yeah, it's very Zionist. It's there are some Palestine. Like I probably could name like five families, but there's a small Arab community. What happens is that we tend to just like blend into like the Latin community. I feel like,
Yeah, yeah,
which like I think was a big part of my upbringing was kind of just people assuming I was Latina, and then just me
I
like,
did it when we started talking.
yeah, and then just me just being like, okay. But yeah, it's funny because
But does it feel like we're including you as one of us?
yeah, I don't have a
Oh,
problem with it.
okay, okay.
One of my, yeah, all my like best friends are Cuban. I grew up within the Latin community, so
Yeah, yeah.
it's funny because when you grow up in Miami, like it's a completely different American experience than anywhere else.
Yeah, yeah,
So
for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. I think my dad can easily also like code switch into being a Latin guy if people like want him to be. So he does that all the time.
Yeah, yeah. No, well, people that can code switch into Latino like community are very welcome. You know, like especially people. There's a lot, dude. One of the things I watched Louis Theroux's movie about about Miami jails, and there was a white dude there, and he sounded like he spoke Spanish.
Yeah.
Speaking English, he just sound, and I was like, yeah, that's the Miami accent. Like
Oh
you
yeah,
just,
there's a dialect. I can.
yeah,
It comes out more when I'm go down there. Like I feel like day three of me being in Miami. When I go tomorrow, it's gonna like I'm gonna start saying bro and like that's fire and like my whole like
that's
thing.
fire.
Yeah, my whole like mouth, the way I talk is gonna change 100%.
All right, cool. Well, I appreciate that. All right, cool. So then, tell me, like the Flower Shop Collective. I mean, it's definitely a noble pursuit. So can we go a little bit through over like you gave me the list, but can we dive in a little bit more detail into how these services help people? Because I mean, honestly, I might not even know how I could benefit from services like that. So it's
Yeah.
nice that there's an organization that puts that together.
Yeah, so we operate in the fine art world, and we are membership driven. So you apply to be a part of us. There's like
Mm,
an application process, and then like we interview people, etc. And then once you get in, uh, we ask you, part of the onboarding process is like, what are your goals? So we have artists that maybe have a BFA and want to get into an MFA program. We have artists who want to start getting into, top tier residencies. We have artists who just need a physical space to create because New York City is incredibly expensive. You probably live with, I don't know, three roommates, and you're probably creating something toxic in your bedroom. So, and maybe you don't want to bring a curator into your bedroom to see a studio visit. Like, it's just, I don't know, like there's no space in New York to be able to do
yeah,
that.
yeah.
So maybe you need a physical space. Maybe you need, like our big thing is that the art world, it can be incredibly isolating, can be very individualistic. And I always say like you have maybe your day job friends and your family and, just people that like that. And they're always going to be like, great painting, great this. But if you can talk to other artists, they can ask you the questions that you actually want to be asked. And for example, like once a month, we hold something we call crit nights, which are like critique nights. And for anybody that went to art school, like critique is a big part of the process of art school. And you show works in progress, and you get feedback from the group if you have questions, etc. So that's basically what we do, and we work in a really tailorized way to the artist. So depending on what their goals are, we set them up for that.
That's really cool. So that's interesting. I mean, it does sound like a very useful resource, and like you said, it's artists of color as well. That's pretty interesting. It's in New York. Brooklyn, I just recently found out through another interview, is sort of the artist is where most of the artists live and the
Yes.
communities are.
Yeah.
So, do you I know you're in Hudson Valley, but were you active out there in the scene? Can you tell me a little bit about it? Because the guy I had on was able to tell me a lot about like the Upper East Side and Chelsea and what was going on there because he works up there. But I still haven't had somebody that's like active in the artist run sort of community. And it
Yeah.
sounds like you have more access to that, especially
Yeah.
because you're probably serving that community.
Yeah, we are. I moved to New York City for college. So when I was 18, and
Where'd you
I
go?
to Parsons, it's an
Okay.
art school. Yeah. And then I was living in Brooklyn until last year. So, and I'm 32. So, I've been in Brooklyn a long time, and uh, yeah, it's a majority of the creatives in New York City live in Brooklyn, more so Queens now because Brooklyn is getting incredibly expensive. And so like that's something that we're just constantly aware of, like, providing space and trying to get opportunities to artists that are being driven out of the city, which is a big reason I live now where I live because Brooklyn, it just didn't make sense anymore for me to rent in Brooklyn financially. And
Yeah.
that's another thing is like there is sort of an exodus happening into the Hudson Valley with artists too because of how expensive New York City is getting.
Are there like galleries popping up and stuff, or is
Oh
it
yeah.
mostly just a migration? Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, there's a place called the Campus, which is north of me, in a town called Hudson, and five major New York City galleries bought an abandoned school and they
Oh,
turned it
wow.
into like a massive gallery. So yeah, it's another reason why I moved up here is because there is an influx happening.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like a little bit how LA is the big city over here, but there's the harbor area, which is packed with stuff going on, right?
Yeah,
Really vibrant art communities because artists get pushed out of the city proper. Same
yeah,
things happens over here.
yeah,
Uh, well, can we talk a little bit about your practice? Is that
yeah.
are you actively making stuff or
I am.
okay?
In the last 2 years, 3 years, I picked up my practice again. I think Flower Shop Collective took a lot out of
That's
me.
why I asked the question
I was
like
more
that.
like admin for Flower Shop. But then I would come to Crit every month and our artist would be like, Nadia, like, where's your work? So I was like, okay, I promise you I'm going to start doing this. But I started and I my main practice I refer to myself as a writer, but I
Mhm.
have been bringing my writing into physical form. So either on tapestries, like I'll embroider into the tapestries like parts of my writing, or another one of my pieces is like an immersive piece on a website that I built with one of my brothers,
Mhm.
and that one is like about poetics and takes people through a series of prompts to create little poems. So yeah, I like to say that my work is just like my writing in different formats of what I think it should show up in.
So like different states of matter, like ice, water, and gas.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Because then people be like, "You're not a like, okay, you're a writer, but like you have physical pieces." I'm like, "Yeah, but it started out as the writing first, and then I just was like, what? How should it show up? At this
Yeah.
fair or like at yeah."
But is it like is are you sculpting text or are you using text as inspiration to make objects that refer to the like just specifically how are we
Yeah.
doing?
Right now, I am embroidering text into different textiles.
Okay.
And then, like, a piece I'm working on right now, which, like, is kind of done. It's shown like twice now already, but I still have some stuff to do with it. Is my text embroidered onto like a piece of muslin that I dyed, and
Mhm.
then I am making sculptural like apricots on the bottom because apricots are just a big part of Palestinian culture. And I'm just gonna like fill the floor with like sculptural apricots, but they're gonna have writing engraved in them. So that's something I'm working on right now, hopefully for Miami Art Week in December.
Yeah. That's pretty I like that. Are you is it, are you one of those artists that is also a poet or no? Do you have the
Oh yeah,
cuz I feel like there's a level of sensitivity there
oh yeah.
that is very telling.
I call myself, yeah, I'm a poet for sure, both in like I have, clinical depression. And also, yeah, I think poetry is a big part of my practice. There's multiple poets in my family, so
Oh, wow.
I think it comes through a lot in,
Do you
yeah.
guys do family poetry sessions? I don't know if I could
No,
handle that
we no,
vulnerability.
because so much of it is about, how we've all traumatized each other. So, turn into an argument.
Oh,
I feel
that's
like
me.
100%. I would be like, "Are you talking about me?"
I had never thought of that. That is hilarious. Oh my god. Uh oh man, yeah. No, I mean I was just thinking just the embarrassment. I didn't think of like the family dynamics that would be unraveled because yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean that I guess that is a part that is what separates visual art from poetry for me like because like I can hide shit, you
Yeah.
know. I can
Yeah.
hide the trauma in visual language whereas like if you're using words and archetypes and stuff, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think that was a big thing for a hesitation for me in making my own work. Like I hadn't made proper bodies of work since college, since like my senior thesis, and it took me a
And
while.
was your BFA or
Yeah,
did you
my
do an
BFA.
MFA?
No, I
Okay.
had not done an MFA. My BFA because I don't know. There's a vulnerability to art in general, and it is a big part of like our culture at Flower Shop Collective because we have immigrant artists who maybe have severe immigration trauma or maybe have
Yeah.
had something horrific that has happened to them. We're also mostly a collective of women, just because I don't know that's how it is. But we it's been important for us to like learn how to make spaces feel comfortable for people because a lot of the work is about heavy things,
Yeah.
whether it's like a painting or uh, a sculpture or like usually the thesis, right, is about something heavy. So that's been a big learning for me too, and it's something that I'm like actively trying to better educate myself on is like how to be prepared to well, we talk about this all the time in our crit nights, but like how to make things about traumatic things without re-traumatizing yourself.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's intense. And I mean on some level like I think that like a lot of people that I talk to that don't have immigrant parents or don't have this experience is like I think one of the things that ties the Latino community together a lot is sort of the trauma of being inside the belly of the beast, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you are escaping your homeland and a lot of the times the problems are there because uh of American influence,
Yeah.
right? Like that's very well documented, especially in Latin America. And I mean, come on, we're talking about what's happening in if like I kind of don't want to bring it up because it reminds me of Elian Gonzalez. When
Yeah.
during the Elian Gonzalez, I was living in DC and there was nobody, like everybody. I was the only Cuban they knew, so I was the representative, and I had to speak on Elian Gonzalez. I fucking hated the kid by the end of it, but
I know those
but
photos are like engraved in my head. We
I
were
know.
talking about that recently.
Well, you're from Miami, so
Yeah, like the picture of him in the closet. Oh my
yeah,
god.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, I recognize. Like, I saw somebody did a piece recently, and I think it was in a museum, and like the kid was, or something was like blocked out with glitter and stuff. Um, and what's it called? And it was just, it was still recognizable to me. I like the image had been obscured, but I was like, I know what that is, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
It's that's how iconic it is. But going back to what I was saying, I definitely don't want to ask you to comment on that because I'm sure you're exhausted. But the experience right now, I want to highlight the idea of like leaving there and coming here. Whereas like for Cubans, a lot of times like home was a safe, like the US was a safe place because they were trying to fight communism. Basically gave them all of Miami,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whereas like, you know, the more you get into how other people have been traumatized by this thing, you know, like over here is a lot of Mexicans who like are still on their homeland. It's
Oh
just
yeah.
not their homeland anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that is actually a really important and powerful service that you guys are providing. I'm glad Luna introduced me to you. I think she knew my interests and was like, "Oh, you're gonna like Nadia."
Yeah, we partnered with Tunnel and Luna last Miami Art Week.
Oh,
We
really?
co-showed with them, yeah, and we had four Palestinian artists showing, I think, myself included. But Yeah, no, we are a highly political space as well. That has come with the collective, and I am very outspoken. I think when you grow up in like the kind of household I did, my parents are both activists in their own right, and I like it comes with the collective. So if you're on our social platforms and etc., we have consistently been vocal since we came onto the scene in 2019. So yeah, it's something that we don't shy away from, and whether it's like what's happening in my co-founder Cesar is from Bogota and he's Quechua descent, so he very much also speaks about just colonialism in South America, etc. So it comes with the space.
Yeah, yeah. No, and actually that is, I mean, I've said this probably on the last two podcasts that I recorded with Miami people, but um it there's something about Miami that is gravitating to, like, it's a place where a lot of people from colonized places, like even Haitians and whatnot, are actively moving there. It is such a strange place to have grown up in,
Oh
like
yeah,
it just changes your perspective. It's almost reverse colonized,
yeah, yeah,
like it's like a little base to have influence, right? Because a lot of people that have families here have their political ideas about how it should be back home, and I'm sure, like, at least I can speak for Cubans, like the disconnect between people in Miami and people in Cuba seems huge to me in terms
yeah.
of like what they think should happen. So all of those dynamics, I mean, there's just so much there to that, like, people don't really consider or have, or they're not even capable of the sympathy for that when they're like, when they have no connection to that,
Yeah,
Like,
no, I feel very lucky to have grown up in Miami, and I feel like even though I'm not of, because I mean, okay, so because my mom, when she listens about this, she's like, "You're not going to talk about, you didn't talk about me." My mom, I know her. My mom is from
she
Poland.
sounds like a Cuban mom.
Yeah, so she is another one that just grew up around Cubans. But she's from Poland,
Oh,
and
okay.
my dad is from Palestine. And my parents met in Slidell, and a big thing that I talk about, and I actually had like a blog post that went, a little bit viral in the beginning of October of last year, is my Polish family, which I'm very connected to, and we speak Polish at home, etc., is like has Jewish ancestry, right? So I talk a
Hmm.
lot about the privileges my white mother's family would have over my brown father's family, my
Yeah.
grandparents on my dad's side versus my grandparents on my mom's side. So I think having that, and then also having grown up in Miami, uh, yes, with the Cubans, with the Venezuelans, with the Colombians, like it just shaped my identity in a way that I feel very privileged to have, because I grew up with just like an understanding of socio-political politics, I think, from such a young age, like my siblings included.
Yeah. No, and it's also interesting thinking about it as I talk to you. It's like it's such a trip for me, people that grew up in Miami but didn't speak Spanish, because it is such a, like, unavoidable, like it's almost
Yeah,
an obstacle. I remember my white friend's parents complaining about having a hard time finding work because they didn't speak Spanish, which, like,
yeah,
out here is unheard of.
yeah.
But anyway,
Funnily enough, both my parents can manage really well in Spanish.
really.
Yeah, I think like just because English is their second language and they just were able to pick up that third language. It's hilarious watching my mom speak Spanish because she speaks Spanish like a Cuban person.
Yeah, yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
I saw a guy that I knew that was British when, like, we went to school. I went to school in Italy, to like a British school, and he, like, I saw this guy that, like, his dad worked with my dad, so it was one of those things where I saw him again years later, and he was British, so he had a really thick British accent, but he learned Cuban Spanish because he, like, grew up, and it was just such a trip to hear the Spanglish with a British accent.
Oh yeah, it's funny with my mom. Yeah, because my mom was a nurse, and like yeah, it was just like a lot of the times had to only speak Spanish to whoever she was serving, etc. So yeah, no, it's Miami is really, I love Miami. I ride
Yeah,
hard for
yeah.
Miami.
Well, how did you get into making art? Like, I actually usually start earlier on with the origin stories of people, but like, when did you discover art was a thing? And then I do want to get a little bit more because we talked about text, and I asked you about the formal elements of it. And now it shows you how like how illiterate I am. I'm kidding, but that I didn't ask you like what is the content, like what words.
Yeah.
But start with the origins. I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I feel like okay, well, I have artists in my family, especially on my Polish side, carpenters, like a big part of my family on my Polish side is like, they're taxi drivers by day, but they're artists, like that's who they are. And so I think I grew up with visual language in the house. However, I think it dawned on me that I need to go to art school in high school. And I just felt, I mean, I did that classic thing that happens in Miami where like, I need to get out of this place.
Yeah,
And then like
yeah.
once you leave, you're like, wow, that was actually really cool where I grew up. But
You were gone at 18, no?
yeah, yeah.
Wow, yeah, that always trips me out. Yeah. But you still
Uh,
it sounds like you're still tied to it.
I'm still tied to it.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
yeah, I have three siblings there. One of my other siblings lives in Brooklyn, but three of my other siblings are in Miami, and then my parents are in Miami. So I go back a lot, and like a lot of my friends are there. So, but yeah, I don't know. I was just always creating. My siblings and I are very close, and we would co-create together. They're all also artists, so we just we would collaborate. My two brothers, Adam and Daniel, they ran like a DIY punk venue in Miami for a long time
Wait,
called the Granary,
okay.
and it was in Little Havana. And Churchill's would send bands over that were 18 plus because Churchill's was a 21 plus venue. So it was a pretty big deal in like the scene for a little while, and then it got too popular and there was no permits involved. Like it was an illegal space, and my brother got so freaked out that he just like shut it down one day. But so yeah, that's like the kind of we were just always doing things, making things, and yeah, I was like, I need to go to a institution where this can be like further cultivated. And
Mm.
I was in between California and New York, but New York is closer to home, and I don't know. I just ended up picking New York City.
No, yeah. I think that those are the basically the two places people think of, you know.
Yeah,
Like
I knew I had to be in a big city because I grew up in a big city, but
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, specifically for art, I think
Mhm.
actually LA has become more of an option because
Oh
originally,
yeah.
like back when I was younger, or when I was in doing my BFA, I went to FIU. I was the
Hey,
opposite.
we love FIU. My
Well,
brothers went to FIU.
the thing is that I didn't grow up until in Miami until like junior high, I think, and then that's when I spent there. So I wasn't quite ready to leave, and I also had spent so much of my life being displaced. It felt nice
Yeah.
to feel like I was from somewhere, but then I stayed there. You know, I stayed at the party too long, and it got dark. Uh, yeah, you're definitely from Miami, and and then finally I just moved in 2008 to LA. But it's funny because it is, I mean, there's something about like places, and I think that this happens a little bit, you know, it probably is going to happen in the Hudson Valley, but like places where people are creative and have very little to do other than very specific things. Like, right, there's partying in Miami and whatnot, but like people kind of want to throw their own party a little bit, you know, and so that I feel like the vibes in terms of that, like just the scene and everybody, and you know, like I guess it's sort of like going to goth night when you're not goth. You know,
Yeah.
like there were like people, you know, bros would show up to events that had nothing to do with them, like culturally, but like it's an interesting mix. It's like not, it's an art scene that's not just for artists,
Yeah.
right? Like, which I really, really, really appreciate about that. But also just like like, you know, like throwing punk shows like that, just DIY with no real, but like, yeah, you probably could get Churchill's to like hook you up with people that they wouldn't be able to use, you know?
Yeah,
So
Churchill's through my brother's bands all the time. If the band was like, we're 18 plus, and then
yeah, yeah.
Churchill's like, hey, we're 21 plus, like go to the granary. So yeah, they were booking shows for not just Miami local bands, but like Jacksonville, Gainesville, like people on tour would come through,
Yeah.
things like that. So yeah, I mean, there's areas of Miami, which I do talk about a lot because Flower Shop Collective does talk a lot about the Miami art scene. It's still very important to me that we talk about that. But it's, I want a Miami where the art isn't just during Miami Art Week, Miami Boswell Week during
Yeah, yeah.
December. And yeah, I mean, I hope like Flower Shop, I have goals of like bringing Flower Shop Collective to Miami for sure.
Yeah, no, me too. I mean, I love the place, and I love like, I was talking to Luna about how like you have to be hardcore to go out and sweat as hard as Miami people do. Like it is brutal. Like
Yeah.
it gets hardcore,
Oh
but you
yeah.
still do it. So I definitely have a soft spot for them too. So I'm definitely gonna go back, especially, I mean, unfortunately I'll probably end up going back during art week, but I don't necessarily partake in all the art week stuff.
Yeah.
Like the last thing that I went to was Making Miami. Did you go to that? It was
What
like,
was that?
it was during the week. It was in the design district, which is now insane. Like,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I was working like so I was just at Tunnel the whole
oh
time.
yeah,
I
yeah.
feel like I went to one opening because we had other stuff. Like that's what happens if you show during Miami Art Week is you can't see anybody else's thing.
That's facts. Okay, and then can we talk a little bit about like conceptually wise, instead of formally wise, about text and how it appears in your work? Like
Yeah.
like what are we writing about? And you
Uh,
said, because you said you're not a writer, but you are a writer. Does that apply to how you approach writing itself, or is that more that like you're not writing books or on paper in a specific way?
I write. Yeah. I mean, I haven't written a book yet.
Is that a
I
sincere yet? Like it might happen, or is that like
Yeah, no, it's on my list. I do want to
okay?
do that. I want to. A big part of my thesis actually is trauma in art,
Uh
and like I said earlier, we talk a lot in the collective about various traumas and how you can make that kind of flow through art. So a lot of my work is about either like bodily autonomy of that women have over their own bodies, or more recently, like my piece I was describing about with the apricots is about indigeneity, and that one's dedicated to Palestine, but like it's a little deviated in terms of the content that I like usually make.
hmm.
But a lot of my stuff is uh, based in I mean, I guess all of my work is political because that is like my outlook. So it's either about like bodily autonomy or like global politics and bodily autonomy. I think that they're connected, right? I think like if you talk to a colonized person from a colonized land, like there's so much that they don't have control over, and a lot of the decolonizing process is about getting that control back. So uh, I think conceptually, that's what a majority of my work is about.
Interesting. Okay, how do you how does that sort of like? Can we talk about your specific traumas being descendant? I mean, because like being from Miami, I've heard every Cuban talk about it, and I'm curious. I also want to say that I picture your father sort of like my father. Were very passionate about politics,
Oh
and
yeah.
and that's the other thing, like that. Talking to you and Luna and Misael have. Do you know Misael Soto?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, okay. Talking to you guys reminds me of how aware the city of Miami is about foreign policy and politics compared to like even a big city like LA. I think that I think that a lot of people out here have like a Midwesterner's concept of like people that are expats from other parts of the city of the world, like trying to not say wasps, but that's basically who I'm talking about, right? Like obviously Mexicans and Hondurans and whatnot are very much in tune, but I think the general politic of Miami is much more foreign policy focused and much more aware of things that happen. I don't know about New York because I haven't lived there, but
I think in New York, it depends where you are. Like Queens,
mhm,
There's a neighborhood in Queens called Jackson Heights, and that is the most diverse zip code in the whole entire world because of the amount
yeah,
of languages. But like that's why like I gravitated towards the immigrant populations of Brooklyn and Queens, and the reason why I do the work that I do is because yeah, I needed to be around those people. I feel like if you're in the Upper East Side or like a lot of parts of Manhattan, maybe you wouldn't find that.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, yeah.
No, that's interesting. But I have a sensitive question about growing up because for me, like when I like we talked a little bit about being from Miami and how that's very different than being from anywhere else if you're Cuban specifically. And when I come out here, people are not very hot on Cubans, right? They have this perception. It's actually really interesting. It's this very weird conception of us that exists out here, particularly again with like the more white communities, the more people that don't have access to communities that have ties outside of the country, right?
Mm.
So there's a lot of like fears that I'm homophobic or that I'm a Republican, which is kind of hilarious. But I didn't experience that until I became an adult. I actually like didn't really experience any kind of like legit prejudices. I'm not going to say racism, but ethnically based prejudices where people assume things about me because I'm Latino until I got here. Because in Miami, I was
Yeah, I
one
mean,
of
it's a majority. Yeah.
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 And then when I was in the UN, that shit didn't exist. Or like when I
Yeah.
was growing up around the UN, I mean, I saw Italians being racist, but it was just such a diplomatic community that stuff wasn't something I experienced until later. But I'm curious because like honestly, it's not until like this year. I remember listening to like Wu Tang and Method Man has the PLO
Halo
style,
style.
PLO style song, which I still love. But like you guys have been kind of ostracized in a pretty aggressive way. And how I'm curious, like what growing up like that is like.
Yeah. I think it's okay. Well, I also am part of the like kids that grew up after 9/11, right? Like nine
Yeah,
eleven for sure affected the way that
you
Arabs in
were.
general were. I was
How
in the
old were you?
third, I was in second grade, maybe
Second
third
grade.
grade. Yeah.
Wow. Damn,
Um,
dude.
so like it definitely, yeah, I'm part of that generation
So as a
where,
kid, you grew up with that. Wow.
yeah, because
Like
I
yeah,
think
yeah,
like if you look at the charts, like Islamophobia after 9/11,
yeah,
just,
yeah, yeah.
and so I grew up with, I mean, thankfully I have an amazing group of core friends. And like when I was growing up in Miami that were not ignorant, but there were times where like people would say insane things at school, but I was pretty aggressive to be honest. So like
So
I
you were
wasn't
you
like
were you were not you were not taking it. You're like fuck you
no,
guys.
yeah, this is so bad to say on a podcast, and I do not like don't do this, kids who are listening, if you're listening. But I one time I punched a kid in the face because he told me to tell my family to leave America's buildings alone, and I don't know what happened. I just like blacked out, punched him in the face.
What grade was this?
Fifth grade.
Fifth
Yeah.
grade. Man, that's what like that just supports my theory that children are sociopaths.
Yeah, and then I had to do detention for like a long time, but he also got detention too.
Oh, I wasn't calling you a sociopath. I
Well, no,
mean
like I was like, my parents were like, why would you do that? And then I told my dad, and then my dad just started laughing and then like shrugged, and he
yeah.
was like, yeah, I would do that too. But yeah, no, I think like there's I grew up in a heightened awareness that Americans had of like of Islamophobia, and
Yeah, yeah.
I would get questions a lot. Like every summer, for example, growing up, I would go to Jordan, which is where a majority, almost all my Palestinian family lives, because my grandparents were kicked out of their home in '48 and
Mm.
then put into UNRWA housing in Jordan, which is what a majority of Palestinians have gone through since '48. And Jordan has the largest Palestinian population outside, actually in general, I think more than Palestine because of just the disparities. So every summer, my siblings and I would go to Amman, to Jordan, and then, just spend the summers there. And like, I would get crazy questions before I would go off to summer break, like, are you
Yeah.
afraid? Like, but you don't cover, like, all these. And so, like, I felt like a lot of times I was like educating all these people. But I don't know, I guess I grew up in a home where I was raised to understand that that was going to happen. I think both of my parents, even my mom, was just so good at like explaining the situation. When 9/11 happened, we had a talk about like how this was going to affect how our family is viewed and things like that. So my parents did a really good job in setting the tone.
But I like that you were like, fuck you.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I
No,
still do that, just like on like a platform that's
well,
different.
no, I mean, you can say whatever you want as long as I don't get kicked off of YouTube, because I am a wuss like that. But and primarily this is an art podcast, so it's not like I'm like every guest I have, I'm like, what's your stance on Palestine? Because that's
Yeah.
crazy intense
Yeah.
to put someone in that spot.
Yeah.
You know,
First question. Yeah.
but it makes, I mean, it sort of is telling of like the Flower Shop Collective. And actually, going back to what I was saying, that I didn't experience racism until I left Miami. I didn't, like, people weren't racist to me because they thought I was Latino. People were racist with me because they thought I was like Arab, or
Yeah.
like, everybody thinks I'm from the Middle East. The more towards Beverly Hills I get,
Yeah.
and going back, like, you're echoing what you were saying about Jordan having the biggest population. I think Tehran is either second or first, or and LA is either second or first in population of Persian people in the country, which is another example of, like, sanctions and stuff like that. Like a lot of these countries, just it's the brain drain thing, right? They want to make it so uncomfortable that people who want to have a normal life try to immigrate.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, thank you for sharing that with me. I mean, that's pretty intense, but it's pretty related to what to your flower shop collective.
Oh yeah, it's, I think, like the my
driving
outlook
force.
is, yeah, Flower Shop is very much born out of my like political worldview, and then it was just really nice to have people share that with us. So like, and
Yeah.
we work now with, I mean, we just worked with Amnesty International actually in Miami, in Brownsville, Miami, with we did like a art workshop with them, with kids who are the victims of gun violence in Florida.
Wow.
So like, a lot of our work is centered in trauma of the global majority, which is what we like to say rather than BIPOC. We like to say that we're the majority of the world.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that better. The global majority. You got me thinking. Well, that's really, I don't know. I mean, it's nice to know that you're out there doing stuff for people, because especially, like, I don't know. I think that it's a very sort of like my idea of an American approach to, like, oh, you're an artist and you're just lucky to be here, which, like, I mean, low key, until recently, it's been like that for people that have lived here, for ages and ages, So, I mean, pretty much until George Floyd died, like, it's still been a very much that kind of an attitude towards a lot of communities of the global majority. But yeah, I have a thought that I like to throw around, and I've said it before on the show, but I kind of want to hear your take on it. I find it really interesting when people want gun control, but they want guns to go to, war zones, right? Like, people want, like, it's a very interesting thing that happens to Americans where they are virtuous within the borders, but they're not really willing to sort of think about the impact. So, like, I think that's where a lot of the sensitive, like, insensitive shit people say comes from, is just like, you do not know what it's like. It's the on the flip side, like, there's the American is number one ignorant person that, like, has never left the country. But then there's also the opposite of that on the liberal side, where it's like somebody is, like, really clueless to how, like, awful
Yeah.
the guns industry in this country is. And like, I'm from Florida, so I'm just kind of like, well, if we're gonna be doing that, we should all have guns, you know.
Right.
But like, I mean, you know, I that's not to like challenge anyone's position on it. I'm just a nihilist about guns, you know. I think Florida will do that to you, but
Yeah.
I'm not like hard fast on anything, and I don't rally for guns. But I just think that that dynamic is really indicative of how people see the rest of the world. You know, like they get offended. You know, like one of the things that I think is funny about Trump when he said that. You know, and I'm speaking for a lot of conservative communities that come here from other places, not just Cubans, but like, is like they're not sending our best. Like that is actually a very specific message that resonates with people that are fleeing those countries sometimes, you know,
Hmm.
because they're running away from something, which is
Yeah.
a really interesting thing, you know, like immigrants are anti-immigration too, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Not
I
all
mean,
of them.
I always like, whenever I hear somebody having, especially like in Europe right now, there's a lot of anti-immigrant rhetoric, and it's like those people don't want to leave their home. They're leaving their home because of either
Yeah.
U.S. or European intervention. Like
Yeah.
they don't dream about going to fucking Wendy's and then Costco after. You know, they had really good food where they were living, and like it's yeah. So I yeah, and I also think like there's a Anthony Bourdain episode, R.I.P., where he was in Beirut uh, during the time where Israel bombed Beirut, and I actually was there with my family too. That was a crazy time. But he says during that episode where most Americans have never seen the consequence of war with their own two eyes.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, I think growing up and seeing the Palestinian refugee camps in Jordan, I just, yeah, you have just such a completely different understanding of what U.S. intervention does. And I think it shapes the conversation differently when you do.
Yeah, and even like when it goes the best as you can, which until wet foot, dry foot, Cubans had open borders into the country. Like it's still traumatic,
Yeah.
you know. Like you're
Yeah.
still leaving shit behind, which is crazy. But all right, I really enjoyed this conversation. Do you have any parting thoughts? Anything that I haven't asked you? Anything you want to say about Flower Collective that you may have had in your back pocket, but I didn't ask the right question?
We are gonna be we're gonna we're definitely gonna be in Miami before the end of the year doing something. I would say to look forward to that. I would say to follow us on our socials and our newsletter because that is where we are the most like active.
Mm-hmm.
And what else? I would say that, we have exciting things in the works and we're going to continue to, like, it is my belief that art is cultural work and cultural work is really the only reason why we understand who we are.
Mm.
Like, I'm sure a lot of the things that connect you to Cuba is through culture and is
Yeah,
through,
I mean, I've
whether
never
it's,
been.
yeah, exactly. So,
It's the
like,
music, it's the food, it's
yeah,
the yeah,
which
yeah,
is art. And so that is a
yeah,
big thing we stand upon is like artists need to be paid correctly. They need to be respected because they're the reason that anyone knows who they are, to be honest.
yeah. That's actually a really interesting point. Um, I maybe ended a little soon. Because you went into plugs. I was just asking more
Oh,
of
I'm
like
sorry.
more of a broad question. I'm like, damn it, there's 10 minutes left.
I can plug later. I'll plug again.
No, no, it's fine. I mean, we'll leave this in for sure. But well, no, I usually ask that question and it can lead into other things, but I maybe asked it a little soon. I'm just a little off. You know, like the early morning ones are the easiest ones for me to do.
Oh, I
But
bet. Yeah.
well, can you talk a little bit about your parents' like political perspective? That I like if that's okay. I mean, I know
Yeah. Oh,
it's hard to
yeah. My
speak.
parents are very, oh, no, they're very vocal. My parents are like leftist radicals, I would say. I did not grow up in like I when it's always interesting to hear because I have so many Cuban friends in Miami who have conservative Cuban parents, and I I grew up in an opposite thing. My mom, escaped communism from Poland. She came on a boat, like a cargo ship from Poland,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like a 2 week journey or something like that. And it was really traumatic for her for all the reasons you can imagine. And my dad was, part of like Palestinian political groups in the U.S. since he got here. So I just grew up with, I didn't grow up with like, the United States is the best country ever. I grew up with like the United States makes life a lot really hard for the world. And so I think yeah, they're still very vocal about that. My mom is a big advocate for like people coming across the border. She actually works with people who have recently crossed over from wherever a
Yeah.
lot. So yeah, they're both they do a lot of community work.
Interesting thing. She fled communism, but she's a leftist, a radical leftist.
Yeah, she fled communism, but I know she gets into arguments with Cubans all the time in Miami.
I mean, I'm starting one right now.
Yeah, yeah. Both my parents, like, they don't believe like this U.S. democracy that we're in is the answer. Like, they think that there's more to it.
Hmm.
And my mom will argue that the communism that we have all known via different communist governments is not good because
Yeah.
it doesn't practice anything that was actually like that the texts of what that is supposed to be. So that is something that she would argue.
Interesting. Well, we can wrap up. I don't have to drag it out. I'm sorry. My flow is so bad today. It's not that bad. But I really appreciate you doing the show. And yeah, no, I mean, I'll hopefully we'll be in Miami at some point at the same time because I really like what you have to say. I really like your perspective. It is also interesting that the fascinating thing about the I don't know. It's just interesting how many like of these places, Miami is a unique one where, and I think maybe Venezuela is also where a lot of conservatives are leaving the country, but there is definitely a socialist bent that runs through all these countries. Even, I mean, Cuba, obviously, because it's like literally a communist country.
Yeah.
But it's interesting how that is like, it's like, I guess what I'm saying is kind of like the soft pedaling leftist is interesting to me, where it's like you are so right wing
Yeah.
that you can't go that, but like, oh no, I draw the line here. Like, it's just such an interesting place to draw the line where the rest of the world just has this completely different perspective.
Yeah, I
But
mean, apparently, like, my parents' first date was an argument about government because my dad had come from, at the time, he came from Qatar when he went to the U.S., and so he came from, like, with a king, etc. And then my mom fled communism, and so then they had like this ideological discussion of who had it worse. Uh,
damn, that
so
sounds
I
that
think
sounds hot. I know I'm talking
right.
about your parents, but that's a hot date.
I think like, and I think like, I feel like I see this for like all politics is that it should all be up for discussion because I don't know if we've come up with a way of government that works yet for all people.
Yeah, yeah.
So like that's where I'll land on like what's happening right now in this country cannot be the answer. Like
Oh
it's
yeah,
people
yeah.
are suffering.
Well, yeah, they're definitely tightening the reins because they're losing control of the sort of the narrative, and I mean, it's at this point, it's just I'm surprised at the mental gymnastics people are capable of doing this election cycle. Like
Yeah.
that this campaign has been re-energized despite what's happening, and that and then I hear smart people like say stuff online where I'm like to some degree it's really really difficult. I empathize with you on that. It's really difficult to see people have like these stated values, but the underlying beliefs make it impossible for them to embrace them fully. Like those like it's like no, like the getting caught up in the lesser of two evils. I mean, this should be the time that this breaks, in my opinion.
I hope
But
so.
we'll see. I
We'll
mean, we'll
see.
see. There's
I
still
think
some
like
time.
yeah, I think the people like for example the people that were yelling at Kamala in Detroit, like I think that those groups, like the uncommitted groups and like the activist groups, are doing a really great job and still pressuring that party to still answer for
Yeah.
themselves.
I mean, that party is nothing like it was when I was a kid.
Yeah,
It used to be about like actually helping people, and now it's about professional managerial class. So
yeah,
if anyway, I mean, I try not to alienate people, but I like honestly with this one, I just can't like pretend that we're turning a blind eye to this, and that's horrifying.
yeah.
So, well, look, we padded it out. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate meeting you. Obviously, we would bro out in Miami in a second, so I really hope to do that. Maybe get some arroz con pollo.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Yeah, during Miami Art Week, well, I'll be
Yeah.
there too.
Oh, okay. I'm definitely
For
going to be
sure.
there.
Yeah.
So, but it's been a pleasure. And then at Flower Shop Collective, I haven't followed it yet, but I will after
Yeah,
this.
at Flower Shop Collective, and then our newsletter too, because sometimes we get shadow banned on Instagram.
Yeah. Well, I would imagine your work gets shadow banned hard for sure.
Yeah,
I try to not get shadow banned now.
yeah, yeah. That's probably a good strategy.
Well, I mean, it depends on the kind of work you do. I had to be like, well, do I want to have an art show or do I want to not have an art show?
Yeah, those are big. Like, I mean, I know we're ending, but like a big reason why
I'm in no rush.
I know Luna is because last Art Basel we were supposed to partner with a fair. I will not name the name, but
You can if you want.
we were. I don't want them. I went back and forth with them a lot, but like they came to us and they wanted to show us, and they had two artists specifically chosen, and the way that they were talking about just like showing our artists was what I found to be pretty racist and how they were talking about it.
Yeah.
And so then I was like, okay, we're not going to do this with you. And then I just remember being like, oh my God, I don't have a backup plan. Like, are we not going to show during Miami Art Week, etc.? I told our whole collective we were showing like all this stuff. And then I just went down one weekend to like try to problem solve this. And I was asking around, and someone was like, you need to talk to Luna. And I talked to Luna, and she agreed with me that those people were not great. And then we just like, I love that it's an artist run space. I'm and yeah, politically like we aligned, etc. So we just partnered with Tunnel, and it turned out to be way better than if we were part of this big fair, because we were in like every hyper allergic like top things to see during Miami Art Week, and like it just
Luna is a heavy hitter, and you can tell by the way she talks to people. You really can. You can tell when someone is that likable instantly, and like you vibe with so quickly. Like you can tell the clout they bring.
So we were lucky that it happened, and I just it was a learning thing for me. I'm like, never again am I going to partner with somebody that I feel like is going to use us as like a marketing tool or something like that, which is what you have to be careful of.
And there's a lot of that going on around in the art scene since the new push to have more people of color, where it's which is a really interesting thing when it manifests, and an interesting thing when it happens to you, like how you feel about it.
Yeah.
I haven't had it happen to me, but it's I know people, and I'm like, and they're like, oh yeah.
Yeah, and it's like I think our big thesis is like I would argue that we don't need those people. Like we can just go do our own thing, and anytime that we've done that, it's been widely more successful. So like we're gonna keep doing that.
Yeah, I one of the things that I think is kind of cringe is sort of this like pity that people have for immigrants, like where like they don't have it for themselves. Like they're proud of themselves and where they are in their lives. It's very interesting cultural thing about it. It goes back to that thing about how people see the foreign policy within the actual continent versus the peninsula of Florida. Yeah. But Dude, awesome. I mean, yeah, like, what can I say? Thank you so much. I definitely look forward to talking some Cuban shit, some Miami trash. When I see you. What was the word that I remembered the other day? Oh, splacking.
What's splacking?
Oh, that's a generational thing. Then it's the word it's the word we used to use for sex.
Oh, I did not know that.
We splacked, yo.
I did not know that. I'll have to, yeah, I'm gonna user test that. Let's see.
Yeah. You say that to an old Miami head, they're
Yeah,
gonna
I will.
laugh. They're gonna know. Tell Jessica Gispert I told you to say that to her. All right. Well, okay. I guess we can end now.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. I just kind of don't want to stop talking to you. All right. Bye.
Bye.
Oh, don't go anywhere though. Hold on.
Yeah, I won't.
Let me wrap up. Thank you guys for listening. Obviously, we have fun doing it. If you enjoy listening to it, please like, subscribe, rate us 5 stars wherever you listen. We've got merch coming at the Other Places Art Fair, which is September 14th. And yeah, we'll be back next week with another guest and another topic that may or may not be art related. Today was Miami, but art related.
Facts.